Hey y'all, it's Mike. So this episode today is pretty special to me because this is with a guy I went to high school with named Robert. Now, Robert and I, we weren't super close in high school. We knew each other. We hung out a little bit. We had some of the same friends, and we really didn't keep up after high school. Robert went on to join the army, then get married, get out of the army, and become a spouse. And this conversation was really interesting to me because it gave me a little bit of insight to somebody that's roughly my age that with a completely different experience in life and eventually became a military spouse and what that journey looked like for him. So this was an awesome conversation. We went down a couple rabbit holes, had a little moment there where we both kind of were remembering our friend Andy, um, who was a Green Beret that lost his life in Afghanistan. And we both kind of had a moment there. But it was really cool to listen to Robert's story and just hear kind of what happened to him after high school and get caught up. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. We got into a few other things while we were talking, but that's what's fun about podcasts is you kind of somebody says something, you latch onto that for a minute, you go down a rabbit hole and have a good conversation. You'll see me kind of looking around for a little bit in part of the video. I was looking for this. I didn't realize that my kids had actually put it away where it belonged because it normally just stays on my desk. I was looking for this to try to turn off the ceiling fan, but regardless, great conversation. Y'all stick around. If you're on YouTube and Spotify, please like and subscribe. That way you can see everything else that's coming up. But stay tuned. Here's Robert.
I did a semester. I think I hated the major more than I hated college. I did computer science,
I can see
and
why you would hate that.
yeah,
That
and it
sounds
was like,
miserable.
and in 2003, it was like learning three different computer languages at once.
Right.
It was just a lot, and
Yeah.
I wasn't really set up for success at the time. So I left, joined the army, and did that for about 10 years.
I always wondered how you made that segue from high school to army. Because were you in JROTC in high school?
Yeah,
I thought
yes.
you were, but
Hmm.
high school was a couple years ago. So it's like,
Yeah, yeah. So I applied for the ROTC scholarship, and I got a 4-year scholarship.
uh-huh.
So I contracted when I first went. So after that first semester, I'd already signed a contract and started getting paid.
Right.
So I had 6 months to join, or I was going to be put in needs and wants of the Army.
Oh, fun.
And they said that they would give me a waiver if I wanted to join a different branch, but the
Right.
only branch they would give me a waiver for was the Navy. Uh,
And that's who wants to do that. So,
well, I took the ASVAB and I took my scores down there, and
mhm,
because the recruiter was in Lake Charles, and he had told me that I was going to have to do nuclear reactor stuff.
right.
And at the time, when you're like 19, it just didn't sound fun.
Hmm.
Uh, Looking back on it, maybe I should have done the Alfie Gaddapi route.
I was say, Alfie did all right with the Navy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Uh,
of course he's in Bossier now. So,
yeah, I was gonna say he just got out what, a
yep.
year ago. So but I joined the army, air defense. So
Right on.
I worked on radars, but mainly I just did the computer networking.
Okay.
So all of the air pictures have to go somewhere
Right.
and be consolidated, and that was
Yep.
kind of our job, was consolidating all of them. It was actually really cool because we got to work with all the other branches of the military.
Right.
So because we kind of stole everybody else's, put like all the radars in the theater together,
Right.
and then could
Well,
distribute that back out to everybody else.
but I mean, that's how information in theater gets shared is everybody uses their sensors and feeds it to the people that need it at the time.
Correct. And
So,
the army being the biggest is
right.
usually the repository for everything, and
Yeah.
then everyone just kind of requests back the information they need.
I mean, that's the way it makes sense though. Like, there's no sense in having all those redundant systems out there if the army's already out there throwing sensors all over the place. And why
You
not
would think,
have the Air Force with their, with the J Stars guys sending stuff to the army when they need it? Which I mean, the J Stars had army guys on it anyway. So, and now with the bacon system, that's going to be shared by everybody anyway. So everybody shares, everybody wins.
yeah, because we had access to the like Patriot, like the
Mm-hmm.
air defense systems like that, so we could put those in there. And then we had like some stuff to scrub off all the secret data, so it would just
Right.
be raw airspace, so you could just see where the airplanes were.
Right, without
Um,
any of the secret scroll stuff attached to it.
yeah, it was nice though when we were in Afghanistan because we could actually see where the Reapers and the drones were faster than the ISR, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance people,
Right.
because the intel people would have to call, and then they would have to go to the skiff, and then the skiff would have to call the people who are
Right.
flying it, and it would take like 10 minutes to go around to find out how far it was out. We could just like look at the map and be like, oh, they're
Right.
like 10 minutes out.
Yeah, because I mean and the length of time that it would take them to actually get the information they needed. I mean, by that point, that's old information anyway.
Yeah,
Whenever you're talking
especially
about in theater.
well, and when we were in Iraq, when you're talking about like an F-16 or an F-18,
Right.
like 5 minutes is half the country if it's trying
Yeah.
to get somewhere fast,
100%.
Uh, so yeah, it was an interesting job. I did it when I was in Afghanistan. When I was in Iraq, I got shipped out to a little itty bitty fob in the middle of nowhere and went and
Uh-huh.
kicked at doors. But it's the army. Everyone
It
kicks
is
in a door.
everybody kicks in the door at some point. All right, so Robert, this is the first time that you and I have spoken in like face to face, probably since high school.
Yeah, like 20 years.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute because you were. When did you graduate? You graduated in 02?
Oh, 03.
03. So you were 3 years behind me.
Correct. You were the
So
drum captain when
I
I
was,
was a baby.
yeah, I was the thought I was hot stuff, drum captain for junior and senior year. Look, looking back, I don't know how anybody liked me in high school. I was a freaking tool, but
Well, I mean, you were I was Brett Harrington's same grade.
yeah, yeah,
So I mean, but that kind of goes with you had to have a certain attitude to be on a drum line though. Like
yeah,
I never looked at you as a tool. You were a drummer. You were a percussionist. I don't want to insult you, but
yeah. It's,
you know,
it's I'll
but I
take
mean, like
whatever
when
I
you
can get.
like Michael Halter, he's one of the
Right.
nicest guys I've ever met.
Oh,
But
hands
when
down.
he when he was when he was on the drum line, he was a completely different person.
Yeah.
It's just there's a different attitude that goes with that mentality of you have to be perfect all the time.
And Halter's still a great guy.
Yes,
Like
he is.
he is still just a phenomenal individual. Like so anyway, so we obviously we've known each other for a couple of decades now. We um and we've just recently reconnected. And I was really glad that you came on because you're the first person that I've talked to on here that I don't have like a recent extended history with.
Okay.
So I don't already kind of know your story about how different things happen. Like a lot of the other people I've talked to, I've known and I kind of knew what their story was. But again, we really haven't hung out since my senior year of high school, which was forever ago.
Yeah.
Um, so you just got done saying that you graduated high school, you went to college for a semester, you're like, you know what, this is not my jam. Um, so Army's like, well, you can join the Army or you can join the Navy. Which one do you want to do? And you're like, green is a better color than blue. I'm coming over to y'all. So
Yeah.
how tell me about that process of getting started and making that decision.
Well, I it wasn't really at the time. It was so Army versus Navy. When you're 19, it really just came down to we had lived around Fort Polk. Both my
Yeah.
parents were air traffic controllers in the Army.
Hmm.
I knew the Army. It was comfortable. It was something safe. And at the time, when you're 19 and you're leaving home,
Hmm.
it's an inherently unsafe time in your life.
Right.
So it was almost like comforting because I knew what the Army would be like.
Yeah. You spoke the language. It was familiar.
Yeah. So I joined the Army. I found a good job, or I thought was a good job at the time,
Mhm.
and went to basic. I went down to MEPS in Shreveport, signed all the paperwork, and I think I was on 4 months of delayed entry. So
Okay.
I worked at Double D's as a server for
Yes.
like 6 months while I was home, and
I
I
worked
left.
there. I worked there as wagon master before it changed over to double D's.
Okay, yeah, because they moved Wagon Master up to Leesville, right? I think.
So, well, they had two. They had one in DeRitter and one in
Okay,
Leesville. I worked at the DeRitter one, and then the one in DeRitter changed over to double D's, and then they
okay.
fired me. So,
Oh, nice. So yeah. It's one of those places where everyone worked.
everybody worked there at least once.
Yeah. Yeah. So I joined the Army. I went to basic at Fort Sill, and then I went to AIT. So I went to my school for air defense in El Paso, and
Okay.
that was like 26 or 30 weeks, so a little over half a year. And straight from there, I went to Germany, and I spent 2 years in Germany.
Oh, that's cool.
Part of the time, 6 months of that, I went to Africa to do a special mission down there to run some radars and do some stuff. Because at the time, this was right after, this was 2004. So the wars in both countries had kicked off,
Right.
and most of the people were going to the desert at the time.
Right.
But the Fifth Corps, which was the Army's corps in Europe,
Yep.
they were still on the European mission, uh, defending essentially against. They were the NATO asset,
Right.
so we were not deploying to the Middle East from Europe. We were only supporting Europe
Mm-hmm.
and Africa because nobody supports Africa. So I went down there for a little bit, and then from there I came back. I got promoted to sergeant en route to Hood in Texas.
Okay.
I ran a platoon there for a year, re-enlisted to leave the base, and
Good
from
move.
there I went up. It was not my favorite unit. I was young and I wanted to deploy. I wanted to
Right.
go to the desert, and I went to the one unit in Texas that was not going anywhere. They
Gotcha.
were they were non-deployable. And so I re-enlisted to go to Fort Drum, which is upstate New York,
Yep.
the 10th Mountain Division. I spent the next 6.5 years there, and deployed twice. And then my second deployment was Afghanistan, which is where I met my wife.
Okay.
She was doing intel. We just kind of met, hung out, and then when we came back, I got picked up to do warrant officer. So I'd applied and got picked up to be a warrant officer.
Okay.
And less than a month later, she applied and got picked up for the Army social work program.
Okay.
She'd already had a bachelor's degree in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And so they direct commission you to lieutenant, second
Yep.
lieutenant, send you to school for your master's,
Yep.
and then pay for your internship
Mm-hmm.
and everything. And so we started kind of looking at, well, should I stay in? Should you stay in? And
Right.
uh, you know, major lieutenant colonel retirement pay is a lot better than W-2 or W-3 pay. So
Yeah.
I decided that I would get out, and follow her around and kind of do the spouse thing,
Mm-hmm.
try the other half.
You came to the dark side.
I came to the dark side.
You came to the bearded without a waiver side.
Yes.
So how did that, so what when did y'all, you said you met on deployment, so like did y'all like meet, like okay this is cool, and then like come back and like reconnect,
So
like how did that work?
we were both working at the division headquarters, TOC, the operations
Mhm.
center.
Yep.
And she was the intel rep and I was the air defense rep. So we saw each other. We would eat lunch and dinner and all that stuff all the time because
Right.
enlisted people are very, both of our jobs, once you got it set up and running, it was a lot of work at the beginning and the end of the
Right.
deployment. But in the middle, there's a lot of nothing going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would just hang out. We'd go to the gym together. We'd go to the USO together, all that kind
Right
of
on.
stuff. So we just hung out pretty much the whole deployment.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we got back, I mean, she was stationed in the same unit.
Okay, that was gonna be my next question. Were y'all stationed together stateside or?
Correct. Yeah, we were
Okay.
both at Fort Drum.
Right on.
So yeah, and that's how we that's how we met and came to be.
That's awesome. So what were, as you were getting ready to transition out, like what was going through your head? Like what did you expect to happen as you were pivoting out of that role of being active duty to coming to the dependent side? Like, did you have a game plan going forward? Did you know what you're going to do? Or were you kind of like, let's get out first and then I'll figure it out on the back end?
Yeah, so it was very much figure it out as I go along.
Okay.
I was still young. I think I was like 27 when I was getting out. I knew I had a lot of leadership experience, and I had a lot of and I'd kind of been, well, how do I say this? I had confidence in my ability to get a job. I did not
Okay.
let the people in the Army, when you first start to get out, everyone is going to try and convince you to stay in. And it's
Yes.
usually the first sergeants that have been in the Army for 25 years that are like, it's going to be hard to get a job.
Hmm.
And I was like, First Sergeant, when's the last time you looked for a civilian job? And he's like, you got me. Okay. Never.
On top of
I've
that, look at what
never.
they just trained you to do. I mean, you were doing computer networking, you were doing all this stuff. I mean, yeah.
So I wasn't scared. And at the time, there was a lot. I mean, this was 2013.
Okay.
So all of the programs for like hire a vet,
Hmm.
all the tax benefits, everything was in full swing at that time.
Right.
So I was not worried in the slightest. And so I was like, I'll figure it out. I had because I had deployed back to back so much, I had 3 months of vacation saved up.
Oh, nice.
So I knew that once I had signed the paperwork and left the army and driven to Fort or down to she was in San Antonio. That's where
Okay.
she went to school. So I knew that once I got there, I had 90 days to
Hmm.
find a job before my paycheck would even stop.
Right.
But we were already we weren't married, but we were already together. So it was
Mhm.
like even if I took a couple extra months, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. So
Right.
I was not super worried about it. Yeah, and that's how I found out that Walmart had like a recruiting program. You could just send them your resume and
Hmm.
they would find a job in Walmart for you. So
That's
that's when
cool.
I did that with them and ended up becoming a project manager.
Yep.
So I would travel around and remodel Walmarts and do all that kind of stuff. It was the best civilian job I'd ever had
Hmm.
if you didn't want to ever be home. So we I spent probably it would be like 8 to 12 weeks on the road, and
Right.
I'd come home for 3 weeks and then be back
Come
out eight to
back.
12 weeks. So I did that the whole time we were in. She was in her master's program,
Okay.
so it wasn't too bad because I would come home on the weekends,
Right.
and she was busy writing 3,000-page papers during the week.
Right.
So it really worked out for
And
us.
y'all didn't have y'all still weren't married at this point, and y'all also didn't have kids.
Correct.
So that being gone for 8 to 12 weeks, really at that point, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, because
Like it's a little bit of a stress, but she's in school, so it's really not that big of a deal.
she was in San Antonio, and so I worked from San Antonio over to Houston, and then
Uh-huh.
south all the way down to Brownsville. That was our
Okay.
area. So like I'd be in like Galveston or something. So I'm only a couple hours away. So
Right.
if I didn't have to work on Saturday, I just drive home Friday night and
Right
I'd
on.
hang out Saturday with her. So I wasn't gone, but like during the week I stayed in a hotel room
Right.
and worked. And towards the end, I was running the projects. So I wasn't just on the team, but I was running my own projects.
Hmm.
Uh, and that was a lot of stress, a lot of fun.
Right.
Uh, it was a lot of long nights.
Did you pick up any certifications while you're doing it, like Sigma 6 or any of those other
No,
PM certs
it
that they
was
have going around now?
at the time I did a couple I mean there were some Walmart specific ones,
Hmm.
like forklift certifications and all that kind of stuff. I did I got some OSHA certifications, so like but they all expired at this point.
Yeah.
But they were like they were like inspecting and
Hmm.
just generalized like OSHA certified
Right.
instructor, that kind of stuff. Uh but like I said, they all expired. They were all 5 year certs, and I haven't done that in at this point 7 or 8, 9 years. So,
Right.
but yeah, it was a great job. I did that when she finished her school. She did her residency in Columbus, Georgia.
Okay.
So we moved over there. Walmart transferred me over, but we had kind of talked about switching from working for corporate Walmart as a project manager and
Uh-huh.
working inside a store,
Gotcha.
just so I could be home more. Because it
Mhm.
was now that she was going to be coming, like she was out of her master's, she graduated. We're not really spending a lot of time together.
Right.
So I stepped down from that job and went into working inside a Walmart,
Hmm.
and uh, it was the worst civilian job I had ever had. And everyone that had come from the stores had told me that I was going to dislike it. Uh, and without putting them down too much, I was not prepared to compromise my integrity
Hmm.
uh, or do anything illegal
Right.
in order to accomplish the sales goals.
Right.
See, because the way Walmart believes is that if they heavily incentivize the sales goals with a bonus,
Yeah.
you will push your team to do better. Uh, but the problem is that they've incentivized it too much. Store managers will max out their bonus at 100%.
Oh wow.
So if you're a Walmart store manager making $90,000 a year, if you max out your bonus, you will make an additional $90,000 in a bonus.
Jeez.
So that's half your salary essentially.
Yeah.
So the temptation is there
Right. I mean, not 90
to
grand's a lot.
yes.
That's a lot of money.
It basically works about off however many dollars and millions your store does is about what the store managers get paid.
Okay.
So you're very small, like Walmart in DeRidder, it's probably like a $70 million store.
Yeah. Which is crazy when you think about how big DeRidder is.
Yes.
That is crazy that you just threw out $70 million
Yes.
for DeRidder.
So I mean, it's gross sales, right? So it's $7 million gross sales, but still, that store manager is probably making 70 or 75,000, plus a $70,000 bonus if they max their bonus, which is 105%.
That is nuts.
Yeah, none of this is secret, proprietary. Like this is just
you can Google that
Glassdoor info. Yeah,
yeah.
And the biggest store I worked at was in Brownsville, and they did about $170 million a year.
Wow.
And that store manager was making well over 200,000. But he had 12 assistants, whereas the store that I worked in, there were 4 of us.
Right.
It was a store manager and 4 assistants, and he had 12 assistants. So it was a much bigger store. I was just not okay with telling people to change their time cards.
Right.
And then so that they would work more than what they got paid.
Right.
Or yeah. You can't have overtime, but you have to work more than 40 hours. Figure it out. Yeah. I wasn't okay with that.
Well, that's because you're a good person. And because you have ethics, and
I believed in the Army values.
Right.
So it kind of, that was the first time I felt despair. I got depressed after Iraq because I had done some stuff and seen some stuff. So I did depression. I had some depression, got over the depression. But I felt real despair because I felt like if I am a whistleblower in this, I'm not actually going to get paid for anything. I'm just going to get blacklisted.
Right.
So I'm going to lose my job. And then I can't, I won't be able to work there or anywhere else.
Right.
But if I leave, I'm abandoning my team.
Yeah.
Like I'm abandoning those poor hourlies to that stuff. So that was
there's going to be somebody that comes in after you that doesn't have that same tradition and ethics, and they're going to do those things.
Well, it was being pushed by the market manager and the store manager. So the regional district, whatever you want to, the one level above the store.
Right.
This was all being pushed. So I was in this dilemma where I would bring up that I wasn't comfortable with it, but I was becoming that odd person out.
Right.
And I just didn't know what to do. And one of my other buddies from a different store was finally like, just leave, like just find a new job and just go. Like, don't worry, like they'll be okay. Like we'll be okay. It worked out in the end. I emailed some of the people that I used to work with in store planning, which was corporate, and told them I loved Walmart, but these are the reasons I was leaving. And they ended up getting the store manager fired on their end. But so it worked out at the end. While I was there trying to find a new job, I was looking at Indeed and all those other websites and just going through, and I saw that Hooters was hiring a manager. So I applied so that I could get the email that said, like, thank you for applying at Hooters to be a manager, just to show the wife. It was a complete joke.
Look what I did.
I had no restaurant experience whatsoever. But lo and behold, they called me back, wanted to do an interview, would match my salary that was at Walmart. So I was like, let's go.
Okay.
Let's go to the restaurant business.
Right.
But at the time I was married. So we had gotten married so that the Army would move us to Georgia.
Right.
So right before we left, we got married. So I was married. I was old enough to where I did not want anything to do with 19-year-old girls. Chicken is probably my least favorite protein. I'm a fish guy, and especially fried food. And then I'm not a sports person in the slightest. So I was like, this is the perfect job
because I don't give a rip about anything that's going on here, so I can just focus on the numbers.
I can do the business. I can run the restaurant. And I was pretty upfront with the regional manager about that. Like, I'm not, I'm here to run, because his big concern was, how do you run? You've never been in the restaurant business. How are you going to run a restaurant? I was like, well, people are people, no matter where you go.
Facts.
and I can get a group of people to accomplish a task
Hmm.
under budget and ahead of time. Like that's just what I do. It's what I
Yeah.
do best. I don't care if you put me in a restaurant or anywhere else. Just give me a couple weeks to learn, and then
Yep.
I'll run the store. If you don't like it in 6 months, just fire me. Like just get
Right.
rid of me. You know. Uh, and it worked out really well. It was really fun. It keeps you
Hmm.
young. You're you have those ups and downs every single day.
Right.
I just there's something about working in a restaurant that I just super liked. It was a lot of fun.
It's also a lot more fast paced, I would imagine, because I mean, I've spent obviously I spent time in a restaurant, and then just some of the other jobs that I've done, the ones that are a little bit more fast paced, and they seem to be more fun because you are always having to be on your toes because you don't really know what's coming next.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a day where everything is the same, or it could be a day where everything is coming out of left field, and you're like, I don't like, why is that happening? And then you have to
Well,
figure out how to fix that.
well, I mean, like so, you know, business cycles. Retail kind of has those annual cycles, so you
Oh
have
yeah.
those humps that are like a month or two long, and
Hmm.
so it's easy to get burned out in those times. And then when the lulls are there, you're doing inventory and all this, so you're never actually off in retail. But in the restaurant, every single day you'll have like this super big rush, and
Yep.
everyone's coming in, and
Then it
like
breaks off.
everyone's running around, and everyone's losing their mind,
Yep.
and then everyone goes out to smoke a cigarette because it's all
Yep.
over.
Because
Um,
there's nobody in the restaurant for like 2 hours.
yeah, and Hooters was especially. I mean, it's probably like this with a lot of the other like Tilted Kilts and restaurants like that, to where you
Right.
had a lot of regulars.
Hmm.
So the bar was a bunch of people that knew you, so it kind of felt more of a, I don't want to say a home away from home, but it was like a
Right.
nice environment even to come work in, because it wasn't just the staff, it was also people that would come visit the restaurant.
Right on.
So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I definitely spent a lot more time in retail than I did working in the restaurant. Because after I left the restaurant, I actually went. I did like a lot of the kids in Dorito did. I worked at the restaurant, then I went to go work at Price Low,
Oh
and
yeah.
worked at Price Low for like basically until I graduated. Um, so I was like me and like Jason House and a bunch of other people that were all like, it was like the band kid workout place was Price Low.
Yeah.
But then I went from there. Do you remember Hibbett Sports?
Yeah, absolutely. It was right down
It
the
was
strip
right
mall.
next to Price Low.
Yeah.
So I started off there, and then I worked for them in Natchitoches at NSU.
Okay.
Geez, for like the next 5 years. I worked
Okay.
there. I worked there all through college, and then I worked there. So I met my wife in college, and we actually met my sophomore year. So we met like this, like the right before Christmas Fest 2001. We met, and then right after I graduated, we I graduated 04. We got married the next month, and then she went back to finish her bachelor's because she already had a degree. She was actually working at the university when we met,
Okay.
and then so I worked at Hibbett all through college, and then the first year and a half of her getting her bachelor's. So so retail, I know all about those slumps and the you talking bonuses. I speak that language very very well on a much smaller scale, but I speak it.
Yeah, it's all the same.
So what were some pre what so it obviously whenever you're active duty, you always hear, or at least it's my perception being on my side of it, and just from some of the things I see on different pages and from different people I know, you kind of have this mentality of what a military spouse dependent is. What were some things you were not really concerned about, but what were some notions you had in your head going forward about being a military spouse? Like I'm not going to be, obviously I'm a guy, so I'm already not fitting into 99% of these stereotypes anyway. But did you have any ideas or preconceived notions about being a military spouse, or are you just like, I'm just going to get out and be the best partner my wife needs as possible?
Yeah, it seems funny, but I never even thought that I was going to be a dependent. I never even thought about it while I
Mm-hmm.
was in, because it just didn't occur to me that like, oh no, I'm going to be a military spouse. That's going to be
Right.
different. I just never even it never even clicked until probably when we were in Georgia, because I didn't really do anything with her unit at all when
Hmm.
she was in school, because she literally, it was just a master's program at the base. So I
Right.
think I went on the installation there in Texas twice at the
Hmm.
most, like once for her graduation. That was it.
Hmm.
So it was in Georgia when I kind of realized, oh, I am a dependent.
Right.
Like I'm not active duty anymore.
Hmm.
And it really hit home when we got out to Hawaii when we were in 25th,
Okay.
because it was instantly, I was around a lot of military people,
Right.
and it was something I knew and I was comfortable with, and
Right.
it was instantly like you're just ignored almost. Like they can tell straight from looking at you, well, you're not special forces.
Right.
You have a beard, you're not special forces, so you're a dependent. I don't
Right.
care about you. That was the feeling, I got. And it was kind of confirmed because at the time in Hawaii, I went to school. So I was like, I can get involved in the FRG, like the
Right.
family readiness group.
Yep.
I can be like the FRG king. Like, right,
Right.
I understand business. I can coordinate. I have all this free time because I'm only going to school. But it's a light infantry unit.
Right.
So it was all wives
Hmm.
and me. So they put me on their emailing list and stuff, and they would text, when things were happening, but I would never get any replies.
Right.
I would see things that would pop up. Oh, we had a lot of fun yesterday putting the packets together for the unit, and it's like I never even knew it
Like,
was happening.
I would have loved to have done that because this is my unit too.
Like I could help,
Yeah.
I and bring a unique experience. So I had had 10 years in.
Right.
I had seen what other units had done.
Hmm.
The best FRG I had ever seen was when I was in Germany. Uh, you were It's something about being Oconus because you were in Japan, correct?
No, actually, so we never made
Oh,
it all. We were in Alaska, which is
okay.
considered Oconus.
Yeah, like
And I would go back to Alaska in an absolute heartbeat. I loved it. I loved being in Fairbanks. It was great.
I would say there's something about being away from
Yeah.
the United States or the continental United States that
Yep.
makes the unit more cohesive. Like you depend on each other more, and
100%.
the families are a lot closer. Like I
Yes.
remember doing Thanksgiving. I remember our commander and first sergeant's wives coming up with all their kids into the
Mhm.
barracks. We'd go into the day room and hang out with the kids while the first sergeant and the commander's wife would cook, and
Mhm.
things like that. It was a very like tight knit family.
Oh
And
yeah.
when I was on the other end in Hawaii, it was very much, it didn't have that same allure. It didn't have that same feeling.
Right.
So it was a little it was sad because I felt like this is an organization that I know really well, that I
Mhm.
like, and I'm no longer a member. Like I'm no
Right.
longer a part of the tribe,
Mhm.
because the tribe just doesn't care about you. They care about your spouse now.
Right. Well, and on top of that, like, so I know from the things that I've tried to do as a male spouse, and because so the Air Force has the Key Spouse program, it's basically the Air Force version of the FRG, and I've tried to be involved in that several times, and I'd bring up ideas or hey, this is what I'm hearing from the group because I walk through and people just talk to me. People like to talk to me. I don't know why, but they love to talk to me, and I love it because I like people. So I'll walk through and I'll talk to people, and I would go to a key spouse meeting like, hey, these are the grumblings that I'm hearing, and I think if you look at what the root cause of this is, this is where the issue is. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Mike, that's a great idea. We'll talk about it later, and like just that's it. And it's like,
Great
and then
dismissed.
I hear stuff that the other spouses will bring up, and they'd be like, "Oh, well, we want to do this," and it's some super flowery get together thing, and all of a sudden that's what gets ballooned up, and I'm like, "Are we a social club, or are we here to actually help?"
What's the purpose of the
Yeah,
unit? Like
like
what's
because
the purpose of this group? Yeah.
because y'all are telling me we're here to help, but the only things that get elevated are these get-togethers. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Like it's you're not a part of the team.
right.
Like and I see it. I mean, I'm sure you've felt this too. It's not just the military, right? It's
Hmm.
the daycare,
Yes.
right? It's going to dance,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Dropping them off and picking them up from dance.
Oh yeah.
You'll do it 20 times and no mom will talk to you.
Hmm.
And then the one time the wife goes, she has like 6 phone numbers from friends and play
Yep.
dates set up. Yeah. It's the like playground.
Oh
right? You
yeah.
go to the park with the kids,
Everybody's
and
looking at you like, why are you here?
yeah, it can be troubling. The only place that it didn't feel super awkward was in Washington State.
Okay.
They're a little bit more
A little more progressive of an area.
a little bit more, yeah, a little bit more free, a little bit more like yeah, they're just a little bit more open there.
Yeah.
But it's still I mean, it was still bad. It's just that was the best place that I had found. And it was very similar because she had spent her whole time in infantry units.
Right.
So it was the same thing at work too, because
Mm-hmm.
well, you're the dependopotamus, right? You're the spouse that stays at home. Like,
Right.
well, why don't you have a job? You know,
Oh God, yes.
like that kind of stuff. And I don't think a lot of people realize how difficult it can be as a spouse to essentially restart your career every 3 years if you're moving.
Oh yeah.
Like I was telling her trying to find a job here, you know, if I don't take a job one level higher than what I had before,
Mm-hmm.
I've essentially wasted that time because I
Yeah.
don't have enough time to get a job, like be an assistant store manager,
Right.
and then get promoted and then do the job long enough for somebody to care when we PCS in 2 years.
Right.
You know, and we're only going to be here for 2 years
Mm-hmm.
because she's doing a fellowship.
Right.
She's a doctor, you know, so we're only going to be here for 2 years. So it's like, well, you know, what kind of job? You know, it's almost like you don't want to tell employers until after they've hired you
Mm-hmm.
because nobody's going to hire a GM for like a restaurant or like a store manager if you're like, yeah, I can do 18 more months, then I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
nobody will hire you. And it's so difficult to not really feel like you're part of the team at work
Mm-hmm.
and not really feel like you're able to progress in your career unless you can find some really good remote job or something
Right.
like that. So it can be difficult, and it's really hard when you come from active duty where you were part of that team. You have
Mm-hmm.
the structure. Uh, as soon as you get to a new unit, you're instantly accepted into the fold, and let's
Right.
help you out. And what do you need? What can you do? And
Mm-hmm.
nobody really does that for the family.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's real concerned about the kids
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, but you almost get that stigma of like, well, he's a guy, he'll figure it out. You know,
Literally,
not from the
literally
wife,
took the words out of my mouth.
not from the wife, but
Yeah.
from the unit. You know, from
Oh yeah.
the military.
No, and
Uh,
I get that totally because something else I don't think a lot of people consider. So, is your wife at USIS or where's she at?
she's at Walter Reed.
Yeah, yeah. So at the schoolhouse of Walter Reed at USIS, the
Well,
uniform services.
she's not actually attending the school itself because she's just
Oh,
doing a fellowship.
so so she's actually at the hospital.
Yeah, she works in the child and family care.
Copy. Yeah. So my wife went to USIS, which is the
Hmm.
the campus right there, and we had to make the decision because we were only going to be there for a year while she got her MPH. And
Hmm.
it was a 1 year program. So we were looking at the cost of we had two kids. Both of our kids were super little. Like my oldest had just turned 2 when we got there,
Okay.
and my youngest was like 6 months. So they were both super little. And we started looking at the cost of childcare versus what kind of job I was going to be able to get while we were there. And we were like, any job I get is literally going to pay for daycare.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I became a full up stay at home dad. And you want to talk about talk about going to the playground and people are like, who is this guy here with this little girl? Why has he got a stroller? Like, or going to so we went to we started my oldest in gymnastics at that point, and the gymnastics class was a mommy and me gymnastics class. And when we first started, the coach would open up the door and be like, all right, mommy and me. And I was like, come on, man, really? Because I was the only guy.
Yeah.
And he finally, I actually ended up becoming friends with the guy. We're Facebook friends now still. And he finally changed the name after about 6 months to like Parent and Tot, or basically it wasn't Mommy and Me anymore.
Yeah.
But it was because I was like, I'd mess with him. I'd be like, come on, dude. Like, you're really going to do that to me every single week?
Yeah.
But it's just little things like that. Like, you're the only guy. And there was a church that wasn't far away that had a Mother's Day Out program. And
Hmm.
you could drop your kid off for like 4 hours once a week. And dude, I found out I could get a lot of errands done in 4 hours without my kids.
Yes. It's
Dude,
amazing how productive you can be.
I could hit every single item on my list for the day and then still have time to go get lunch, like a sit down quiet lunch before I pick my kids up.
Yeah.
But again, like I'm walking around to pick my kids up, and people are like, "Who's this big bearded guy?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm here to get my daughter. That's what I'm here for. I know it says mommy and me, but mommy's at work, daddy's here to do it." And I think that's when I started telling people, I'm like, "Look, dads don't babysit." Like everybody's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're babysitting today." It's like, no, I'm parenting. Dads don't babysit.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we she got pregnant while I was still in college out in Hawaii. And so it lined up perfectly. I graduated, and then 2 months later, our oldest was born.
Okay.
So it was perfect. And we had like, I think it was like 8 months left on island.
Okay.
So I was like, I'm not getting a job for 8 months. Like
Right.
at the time I still had some value, like morals. So I was like, it's not right to go get a management job
Right.
for 8 months. Like I'm really screwing the company over
Hmm.
because it's going to take me 6 months to get good at it and get
Right.
trained. And then I'm going to tell them I'm leaving. And so I was okay.
Then, yeah,
So,
then you're going to turn in your notice.
yeah. So I was like, well, we're only here for about 8 more months. I'll hang out with the kid. And then when we get to Washington, well, I'll get a job there. But as we were leaving, COVID happened.
Mm,
And so when we got delayed leaving Hawaii. They had already taken all of our stuff, but we hadn't
right.
turned our house in yet. And so we got stuck like an extra month
Oof.
with nothing, just like our travel bags.
Ouch.
Uh, it was horrible because if you were in a hotel, the army gave you like $4,000 a month extra compensation for being outside of your home during
Uh
COVID
huh.
because they wouldn't let. But we had our house, we just didn't have
Right.
our household goods, so we got
So
we
you
got
got
screwed on
nothing.
that. Yeah, we got nothing. So when we got to Washington State, there was no spots for childcare at all.
Right.
There was the waiting list was like nope. On base is impossible to get childcare
Hmm.
unless you're dual military. So it was really like, well, it's going to be at least a year before I could get a job because we have a kid.
Right.
And then during that year, she got pregnant. So then it was like, well, we're not going to be able to find infant childcare and
Right.
toddler childcare and me get a job and make enough money to do
Yeah.
anything but watch the kids. And at that point, who's raising the kids? Like, why am I working?
Right.
Like, wouldn't we? In the way I kind of explained it to her is like, our kids are going to be institutionalized soon enough.
Hmm.
Maybe we should take the like maybe I should sacrifice the next 4 or 5 years and kind of instill some of our values in the
Right.
kids when they're young. Uh, because what's it matter at this point? Like, I wasn't set up from high school to be the CFO of Microsoft or something. So like,
Right.
like why don't I just embrace making our kids better than what we were to give our
So
kids a better chance?
so you just brought up an excellent question because this is something that I've talked about ex- pretty extensively from my point of view, and I've asked this a few other people. How what was that mindset shift for you from because what I talked about before was I basically worked since I was 12. Like
Mm-hmm.
since I could push a lawnmower, I would walk around my neighborhood cutting grass, and then from the time I was 16, I was collecting a paycheck. And
Yeah.
then, basically from the time I was 16 until the time we went to Maryland, I spent because at that whenever we left for Maryland, I'd been in law enforcement for 8 years. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And going from full-time, gainful, meaningful employment to a stay-at-home dad, that was a giant mindset shift for me. It took me a while to be like, okay, it's not that I'm not working. I'm still kind of working in the house because now I'm making sure the kids are taken care of, making sure that my wife has everything that she needs, making sure the house is basically looking at the house as almost like a business. Like
Mm-hmm.
what does the house need to operate smoothly? But then still feeling like I'm not contributing to trying to get it through my own head. Like I'm not contributing because I'm not bringing in something. So what was your mindset shift like? How did you go through that?
So I had an easy time
Okay.
because I got to go to college and
Hmm.
we had kind of geared up because I had the GI Bill, but I was also working full time and making decent money.
Right.
Like the project management job paid pretty well, and they paid you for mileage and food and all this other stuff. And then the Hooters gig,
Mm-hmm.
matched basically everything I got. So I was getting paid good enough to where I wasn't even worried about college. So when we got orders to go to Hawaii, and I knew I was not going to be able to transfer because there's not a corporate Hooters out there.
Okay.
I was like, well, the GI Bill pays you per the zip code of the school.
Right.
So we looked it up, and it was like $2,700 in Hawaii.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, well, it's not as much as what I'm making now, but that could be my job,
Right.
and it's completely doable to get a bachelor's in 3 years
Mm-hmm.
when you're not 18,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
it's,
When you're not 18, there's a lot of things that are possible.
yeah. So you're just more focused. You care about it more. You do
Mhm.
summer school,
Yep.
right? You don't just do 12 hours. You'll do
Mhm.
16 or 18 hours. So I was like, we're going to be there for 3 years. I'll do 3 years and do a bachelor's, and I'll use my GI Bill, and that
Right.
will be my job.
Right.
So we had kind of had it from there that, or so my mindset had kind of changed that time to where, well, I'm still bringing in money, I'm still
Right.
contributing, and this is my job, and it was kind of fun. But then when the kid was born, it was like, well, this will just be temporary,
Mhm.
and then I'll go back out there and get a job. And then the big shift came when we got to Washington. It was like, well, she's pregnant again.
Right.
This isn't going to be. And I was probably, if I'm being honest, I probably was depressed for a while because it's that sense of like being a man and not
Mhm.
bringing in the money.
Yeah. You're not.
You
You're no
know,
longer the breadwinner. I get it.
yeah.
100%.
Like I'm definitely I definitely identify more with Gen X than being like a millennial.
I think a
Because I'm
lot of people from our hometown do.
like I'm a millennial, but I was raised by a boomer, so I
Yeah.
was I was raised like a Gen Xer. You like go
Yep.
outside until the street lights come on, that kind of stuff. So I
100%, dude.
I identify a lot more with Gen X than the young people, or the people younger. So it was hard for me having that more traditional mindset
Mhm.
to be like, well, I'm going to be a housewife,
Right.
but once I kind of got over it and realized, well, this is really important. This is a big responsibility.
Mhm.
Uh, I can help out. I can meaningfully help out.
Right.
And then like you take a weekend off and you see like your spouse try and handle the kids by themselves, and you instantly see like, okay, I am helping out. I am good at
Yeah,
something.
you're looking at your spouse like, why can't you do this? Like, it's simple.
It was, and it's hard on her part too, because she's a clinical social worker.
Okay.
So we do a lot of talking about feelings in the house, whether
Right.
we want to, or whether I want to or not. We talk a lot
Right.
about feelings in the house. And she reminds me that it's just as hard for her to feel like she's a bad mom,
Oh yeah.
because she can't be as good with the kids, because I try and remind her, well, you're just not experienced. Like, keep in mind, I've changed 20 times more diapers than you,
Right.
30 times more diapers than you. It's just, because I've done it all day, every day for
Right.
5 years now.
But
But
that's a
it's
hard thing for her to hear as a mom.
exactly.
Yeah.
So like, as hard as it is to be the stay-at-home spouse as a male, and as isolating as it can feel,
Mhm.
it's just as bad, especially being military. You're
Mhm.
really in a male-dominated environment,
Yep.
and especially for her being in these light infantry units.
Oh yeah.
If she was in a signal unit, or an aviation brigade, it
Mhm.
might be a little different because there's a lot more females in
Right.
those. But she was in light infantry for a long time, and it's 96% males,
Oh yeah.
and they're not the like we talk about the kinder and gentler military,
That's not them.
but in the back rooms they still are the same as they were when I was in.
Right.
They still talk the same, walk the same, act the
Mhm.
same. Because I would be hitting 19 years this year.
Okay.
So those people, those lieutenant colonels, those colonels,
Right.
are our age.
Yeah.
They so like and they still have our mindsets. They haven't
Right.
they haven't been they don't have the new age mindset of
Right.
being more progressive, more inclusive.
Mhm.
uh, Her big thing that she tried to teach was sleep, and trying to teach commanders that giving your soldiers more sleep and
Oh
they'll
yeah.
do better in training is like talking to a rock.
Oh yeah.
Because to the military and to the army, sleep deprivation is how you train.
Yeah,
And so
because if
like
you can
even
because if you can
something,
do it with 3 hours of sleep, then you're doing better than the guy that can do it with 8.
And so it's just such an interesting concept. She's like, here's research that
Yeah.
shows this. And they're like, I don't care. We're going to have 1 hour of sleep tonight. And it's
And
like,
here's the research that shows why these 1 hour, 1 to 3 hours of sleep a night for a week in training is detrimental in the long run.
well, yeah. And she used to come in every now and then. Like she'd come home like super upset, like crying,
Mm-mm.
because it's like she would go to this meeting and brief these commanders and talk to them about X, Y, and Z. And they
Right.
would be like, thanks, Captain Raff, and go sit down.
Right.
And then, like 2 days later, her partner, which is a male psychologist, would get up there, introduce himself as a doctor, and
Right.
then tell them the same exact thing with
Mm-hmm.
almost the same slideshow. And they're like, "We that sounds good. That sounds good, Dave. Well, we're gonna get on
Yeah.
that." And they actually start making, and it makes her feel like, "Well, why wouldn't you listen to me?" You
Yep.
know. So it's like you have to like she has to do. She really does like women in the military really do have to do they start from like -20. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
to do more than a guy to succeed, but they start from a deficit.
Yes.
They start from skepticism, and it's
Yep.
the same thing being a dad, like a house spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Being home. You start off going to dance at -20,
Yeah.
and you have to earn that zero to
Oh yeah.
start from scratch.
They're like, oh, just look at him being nice. He's giving mom the night off, bringing the kids to
Yeah.
dance. And it's like, no, mom's either like mom's deployed or, mom's working, mom's studying this and the other. And like, I relate, dude, I swear it's the parallels are great because the story you're telling is one that I've heard so many times, but not very often from a guy that was in on the enlisted or just in period. But that whole idea of your spouse having to prove themselves, even though they know exactly what they're talking about, they like so my wife is medical
Hmm.
and she came in as a captain because she went to vet school and as a captain and as a major, it was really having to fight to prove your point and often being told, okay, that's great. And then having one of her colleagues do the same thing you're saying, like come up and say the same thing. And then be like, oh, that's wonderful. And then it
Yeah.
wasn't until I joke that she got pulled over to work for the inspector general's office to go do IG stuff for like a
Oh,
year.
cool.
And I tell her, I'm like, that time she spent in IG was a game changer for her because it taught her how to stand up to the wing commander and group commanders that were lieutenant colonels and full birds, as a major, and be like,
Hmm.
no, sir, this is what we're seeing. This is where your deficit,
Hmm.
and have to basically fight that point respectfully because
Absolutely.
it's still the military. You can't just say no, you're wrong, you're an idiot. You have to say, with all due respect, sir, here's the data. So
Yeah.
it really taught her how to argue her point and be confident doing it because she is not the same leader coming out of IG that she was going into it. Like she still knew her stuff, but she's a lot more assertive and can argue her point better now than she could before. And she gets a lot more. And of course, now then she promoted to lieutenant colonel, and she kind of has now she has a little bit more push whenever she says something.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
man, I hear that time and time again about, and I'll tell you one thing that we just went through not too long ago was as we were leaving because we just left Georgia.
Okay.
We were down at Robbins Air Force Base in Warner
Hmm.
Robins, and so my wife deployed back to back when we were there. She deployed the second year we were there, short notice. She had like a 10-day notice to deploy. Um, Came back and then went again the following year. So went back 9 months later. Um, and whenever she came back, like our girls are older. My oldest is about to turn 11, and I've got a 9-year old.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I wish spouses understood was if you've been through it once at one age, and then your spouse gets ready to deploy or go for an extended TDY or whatever again, if your
Hmm.
kids are older, it's not the same experience.
Yeah.
Even if they're just 1 or 2 years older, it's not the same experience because your kids understand things differently. The emotions run different. Um, and so for us, that was the second time that she had missed our oldest daughter's birthday,
Yeah.
which whenever you're turning double digits, it's a big thing to a kid.
Hmm.
Um, it was the second time in a year she had missed school. So we also talk a lot about emotions in our house because I try to tell my kids not the same thing I heard as a kid, shut up or I'll give you something to cry about, you know, which my mom was great. She only told me that like 10 times growing up. But you know, if my mom ever listens to this podcast, she'll probably hit me for saying that. But we try to explain to our kids like you don't want to keep those emotions bottled up. You want to keep them out. And so I was like explaining, I was trying to tell my wife the way I felt about different things from my point of view. And I look up and she's crying. I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, everything you're saying, she's like, there's nothing I can do to help. But it makes me feel like you're already discounting me even being here.
Hmm.
And I stopped and thinking, I was like, wow, I was really just being a selfish jerk right there because it's almost like I was almost counting on her being gone again the next year.
Yeah.
And like basically like walking through everything like I'm going to have to solo parent again. So it really can kind of play on both on the dad and on the mom too. That's what I was getting at. Like there's a lot of emotions on both sides that I don't think people look at that whole picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we were saying before, being a male dominated environment, they're always going to be the odd one out, just like we
Hmm.
are. It's like, so then there were some times when I really, like, we both have said at different times, like, like, I wish we could just switch places. She's like, I wish I would have just let you do the warrant thing,
Right.
because you'd have turned in your retirement packet by now, and I could be a stay-at-home mom because I would have loved that. And it's like,
Right.
well, it is what it is, though. And I think it's for the best. Is like the choices we made were for the best.
Hmm.
uh yeah, just trying to, like you said, every different age for a kid, they, like, you can even, 2 and 4,
Yep.
4 and 6,
Hmm.
they're gonna treat it all differently. It's new again
Yeah.
because they're at a different developmental stage of life,
Hmm.
so they can process things. They are processing things differently.
Yep.
And at some ages, it's just like, well, where's mom? She doesn't love
Hmm.
me because she's not here.
Right.
And and then you have some ages where it's just going to be, like my 2-year-old, he would just be sad, and he
Right.
wouldn't probably even understand exactly why he's sad.
Right.
But it's just, and from time to time he'd ask, but it would be, and it's, I don't know when it would be. I don't know if you could say it's easier or harder at any age. I think it's just as hard. It's just their ability to express those emotions
Yeah.
become better,
Yeah.
and that can be a bad thing
It really
because they're
can.
expressing them to you.
Yeah.
You know.
And I'll tell you something that was really difficult, difficult and interesting. This last deployment was my oldest is she's a very smart girl. She is incredibly intelligent. She's way smarter than I was at 10. Um, but she's also very witty and sarcastic, and she uses those with a surgeon's precision. She's not like whenever she uses sarcasm and her wit, it's not off point. It is the delivery is perfect. And she would be saying stuff to my wife while she was deployed this last time. And whenever she would finally get off the phone, I was like, dude, I was like, that was harsh.
It's
Like,
me.
like
Like,
I know you really didn't mean for it to be that harsh. I'm like, but I guarantee your mom's in tears right now because that was just unnecessarily harsh. Like stuff about, oh, well, you're probably gonna miss Christmas again next year anyway. So what does it matter? Like it's just like,
wow,
oh,
wow.
ouch. Like, man, like why don't you save those for me? Like you can leave mom out of that. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's that age where, like, she's obviously upset, and that
mhm.
upsetness is coming out in,
Oh
like,
yeah.
an anger almost,
Hmm.
quippy.
Oh yeah.
uh,
But yeah,
yeah,
and
it
it's
can
and
be
it's
really.
funny looking back because like the first time my wife deployed, we were in Alaska, and my oldest during the first deployment, I think my oldest was 4. And at that point, they didn't like neither one of them even really wanted to talk to mom. Like she would be able to FaceTime, and it was about a 12-hour time difference, and they'd be like 45 seconds to a minute on the phone, and all right, bye, because they just don't get it at that age.
Yeah, yeah. As I say, our daughter's 4, and she just started full, because I'm gonna go back to work, so she started full time, like pre-K.
Okay.
So we drop her off about 8 in the morning,
Hmm.
and they're open till 6 p.m.
Right.
That way, depending on whenever our jobs are, we can, but I usually pick her up about 4 o'clock, like
Okay.
3 or 4 in the afternoon. And she's angry that
Yeah.
she has not seen mom that long. Like she is definitely going through uh some growing pains right now. Like she'll
Mm,
yell at Jen when she gets home.
mm,
Like she's very mad, like very upset. Like you can tell it's like that abandonment.
right.
She feels like, because we wanted to get her into school so she could get some friends
Hmm.
so that we could adjust because she's old enough now that where she talks and misses her friends from Washington.
Right.
She'll be like, when am I going to be able to see Rowan again? And it's like,
Hmm.
probably never. Like,
Yeah.
but how do you say that?
Other side of the continent, darling.
Well, and a lot of our friends group. So we were doing swimming lessons there,
Hmm.
and I ran into a guy in the changing room that was prior service,
Okay.
Army, and he was just like, "Hey, are you a nerd? Do you want to join a D&D group I have?" And so I was like, "Okay, we need friends,"
Right.
and that became our friends group because his wife is a nurse, and the whole friends group, all of their wives were all civilian nurses, and they
Okay.
worked together during COVID. So it was like a group of like 5 or 6 families, and that became our friends group. So it was very interesting because our entire friends group in Washington was non-military.
Okay.
But it's really hard because none of them, you can't talk to them about
Right.
anything work related because they just don't
Yeah.
get it. And then PCS, like they were all like, well, it's only 2 years, and like your fellowship will be over. You guys can just
Come
come
right
right back,
back.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
It's not the way that works.
maybe, we might,
It's
but
like
there's no
unlikely.
guarantee. Well, her going to this school thing, she has to do a utilization tour. So they're giving
Right.
her a specialized training in child and family therapy.
Hmm.
So she's going to have to go somewhere that uses that.
Right.
So even though she's going to be a major, which means there's less positions,
Hmm.
as you go up, there's less.
Yep.
So there's going to be less job openings. The timeline's going to be a lot tighter because you can't push it back or forth because the school will just end. And it has to be a utilization tour.
Right.
So we probably are going to get 1 or 2 bases to choose from.
Yeah.
Like we might not even get. They might just be like, "Hey,
You're going here.
you're going to J Bear. Good
Yeah.
luck." You know. Uh,
If you go to J Bear, I'm coming to visit. Just letting you know.
yeah,
I'll
absolutely. I
use
mean
that as an excuse.
that's one of the places that because she'll probably end up being a director of training
Right.
for new for the SWIP, the social work intern
Yep.
program. And that's going to be one of the newer sites that's going to open up right about when she graduates. So she's
Hmm.
hoping maybe she can like slide into there, but she's not sure how much she's going to like Alaska. She went up there a couple of times. So she went up there TDY from Hawaii, and she super loved it.
Okay.
But she was only there for like 2 weeks.
What time? Do you remember what time frame she went?
Summer,
Oh, everybody loves Alaska in the summer.
yeah. Well, it was like spring, so the roads
There's
still had
still snow
snow
on
and
the
stuff
ground.
on them,
Yeah.
but the days were longer. Like
Yep.
the only time she got super scared is it was Super Bowl. Whenever the Super Bowl was this last year,
Like
uh,
February.
I was gonna say that's when she went because the guy was having like a Super Bowl party and invited
Okay.
her to come out, and she was like trying to use the GPS. It was
Right.
taking her down some road that she's
Yeah.
like, I can't even see the road. There's just snow everywhere. I don't know what I'm doing.
That's because Alaska. We played this game called Whose Lane Is It Anyway? Because you couldn't see anything. So seriously, like if y'all end up going to J Bear, let me know. I still got a lot of really good contacts up there, so I can get y'all plugged in with different people. So it
Yeah,
might
because
help make the transition a little easier.
I think it's a joint base, right? Isn't
Yep.
it a Army Air? Yeah.
It's
So
it's 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 a Air Force base that the Army thinks they run.
yes. Well, that's because the Army's hospital is in Fairbanks.
Yeah. So the Army hospital is at Fort Wainwright.
Yeah.
Um, which was so we were at Eielson, which is up on the other side of North Pole. Which is also a lot of fun to tell people to show people my driver's license. I still have my Alaska driver's license.
Yeah.
And it shows like North Pole, Alaska, and they're like, "Shut up!" I'm like, seriously, I lived in
From the
North
North
Pole.
Pole.
I seriously lived in North Pole, Alaska. Um, but anyway, so I still got a lot of really good contacts up there. People that I'm still really close with because we enjoyed our time in Alaska so much. Me more so than her because she was deployed. She was either deployed or in training for all of it.
Yeah.
And she had a really bad react. So Alaska's a lot of birch trees,
Okay.
and birch trees, for whatever reason, do not like my wife, and she spent the whole time sick as a dog. Um,
That sucks.
I ate Alaska up. I didn't care if it was -40, which I didn't know was humanly possible to be outside in until we were there. Because I'm like, I'm a Louisiana boy. I'm gonna die. And then I was working. I was selling cars for Toyota in Fairbanks, and going outside in -20 to talk to people about cars. And I was like, this really ain't that bad, actually.
Yeah, I found out from Fort Drum. Once it hits like zero, it's just cold. Like you can tell
Yep.
the difference between when it's like 50 outside and when it's like 30.
Yeah.
But like once it gets to 0 Fahrenheit, it's just cold. And
So
like,
I will say that there's a difference from like 0 to like -10 to 15 is about the same. But I could within like a 1 to 2 degree difference tell you the difference between -11 and any other temperature, because at -11 the inside of my nose would start to crystallize,
yeah,
and I could feel it at -11. I don't know why, but that's every time I was like, what the temperature is. I look at my phone. Oh, it's -11. Okay, and
I
from
would,
-20 to 30 is definitely different. -40 hurts.
yeah, I
Negative
can
40,
imagine.
it is it that just absolutely hurts. But I tell you now, I would go back in a heartbeat. I would loved it.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I've heard that from a lot of people. I would love to take her back to Germany. I loved my time in Germany. Like it
Mhm.
was a lot of fun. I got to do a lot of cool traveling because you're right there in the middle of Europe.
Yeah.
And any NATO country, you can use your military ID card and a leave
Mhm.
form. You don't have to have a passport.
Oh, nice.
Like your military ID and a leave form would get you around. So you could go to the Netherlands,
Mhm.
Sweden, Denmark, the UK, Spain, Portugal, Italy,
Right.
all those. You needed the passport if you're going to go to like Czech, Ukraine. Good luck with Ukraine now. Poland, all those types of countries. Uh, so yeah, like you could take a weekend trip and go ski in the
Right.
Swiss Alps.
Nice.
You know, it's unbelievable. So
Yeah.
I'd like her to go there.
So we've unfortunately never been over like officially like all the way overseas yet. The only overseas place we've been is Alaska.
Correct.
And at this point, it doesn't make much sense for us to go overseas, because we're probably going to be where we're at for 4 years because of my wife, because of the position that she's in.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, my oldest will be going into high school.
To get
So
stabilization.
we need some sort of stabilization, at least till the kids get out of school. And we keep joking, like, if she hits 20 and she's still having a good time, then just press on. Like there's no sense in punching out at 20 if she's still enjoying it. I was like, because if the kids get out of the house and a spot like in Ramstein or Spangalum opens up, we
Yeah.
we can
Have fun in
bail.
college, kids.
Yeah. Because then the kids are like, whenever it comes time for summer vacation, we don't have to worry about the kids wanting to go to like, you know, Florida or whatever. They're going to want to come to Europe. So,
Yeah, like I say I wish we could go there, but we're really looking. So we'll be here for 2 years.
mhm.
That'll put her at 17 years,
Okay.
which means the next PCS will probably be our last.
Yeah.
Because she is. I tell her to keep her options open so that
Mhm.
if she loves the job at 20, but she's pretty much like no.
She's done.
She's pretty hard. She's pretty hard on the
And
18. I'm dropping my packet for 20 and I'm out.
that's, but once somebody gets to that point, there's really almost no point in talking them out of it.
Well, and like I told her, I said, go to the ILE, go to like your major school, like
Mhm.
the academic thing, so that the options there
Right.
for you to put in for the lieutenant colonel board, because you never know what's
Yeah.
going to happen at that time. Uh, maybe I get cancer, and you staying in helps me get treatment. Like who knows? Like
Hey, that
that's my whole
TRICARE for
point.
life can be handy.
So like, try and set yourself up just to make
Right.
sure. But she's probably going to get out. So we're looking at the next duty station is probably going to be where we're going to want to like stop by the house that we would like to live in for, high school for the kids.
Then don't do
We're
J
trying,
Bear.
well, yeah. So we were trying to look at bases that like I told her probably Texas, just because I'm comfortable with it. I know it. The San Antonio area, New Braunfels,
It's good
like that
schools.
kind of stuff. Uh, we would both surprisingly go back to Georgia.
You
Uh,
know, So
Like,
you were joking earlier about being told where to go. So whenever we left Alaska, we had this pipe dream. We were like, okay, we want to go to Scott Air Force Base in Illinois because we've heard phenomenal things about that base. Like nobody, I've met one person that said they hated their time at Scott and they were a maintainer. And I was like, well, of course you hated your time there. You're a maintainer. And look at the mission that that base has. It's nonstop flights all the time. You're working your butt off.
mhm.
Um, but we had all we were going to go to Scott. We were going to go like we had 4 or 5 different places that we were like trying to get. And then I get a phone call because I was working on base doing I was doing personnel security. So I was like your SF-86 background check stuff. Like
Yeah.
I worked for the base office doing that,
Okay.
like doing running all that paperwork. So I get a call from a buddy of mine that was he had been IG, but he was medical, so he knew Kelly really well. And he was like, "Hey, I just saw your wife's name pop up on our inbound. Congratulations." I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" He was like, "Yeah, congratulations, man. You're coming to Little Rock." I was like, "You better say psych right now." And he was like, then he said, am I the first person you're hearing this from? I said,
Yeah.
"Yes." I don't
Wow.
even think my wife knows this information yet. And he was like, "I'll call you back." And like, and the bad thing is, like, I feel guilty saying it, but like, that's where our family was. So like, her whole family lived in Little Rock. My mom had moved back to Arkansas, so going to Arkansas was like a pipe dream for our families.
Mhm.
It was about the
Yeah.
furthest thing on my list of places that I wanted to be because I wanted to be somewhere I wanted to be somewhere I needed my GPS to get around.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we're in Little Rock and we ended up being there a year and a half. At 18 months, Kelly gets a phone call. "Hey, you're going to Robbins." And we're like, "Excuse me?" We had, what? They're like, "Yeah, you're getting a out of cycle, basically command directed out of cycle PCS."
Okay.
Yeah. We were like, they're like, "Yeah, Robbins needs a public health officer and we're sending you." So we weren't even in our house for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Like she was on station for exactly 2 years. But
Wow.
before we and they, so we had two moves back to back where they're like, "You're going here. Oh, hey, by the way, you're going here." And it's like, oh, but George, you know what? I look back and it was not the best place for me job wise,
Mhm.
but the area we were in, our girls were in great schools. The things they were interested in were phenomenal for them. We had made some really good friends there. So, as much as I almost hate to say it, and maybe because we've only been here for like 6 weeks, I could go back to Georgia.
If you ever come to DC, I can guarantee you a job in security. My
Well,
my battle buddy from Iraq or Afghanistan,
uh huh.
he's a GS-14. He's like the securities manager for the Department of Energy.
Nice.
So he runs all of the guards for the entire
For
like
the whole
DC,
DOE.
Maryland area.
Hmm.
So he's just like in they're always short guards, but they pay so they do 12-hour shifts of
Right.
60-hour work weeks, and it's 38.50 an hour plus
Hmm.
overtime. So he's like those dudes make like 100 grand a year,
Oh
like
yeah.
plus. He's like, and you do nothing. You sit in a building because most of the sites that they guard are not manned. They're out in the
Right.
middle of nowhere. That is like a server hub or something like
Right.
that. So.
Yeah, I so I got my second degree that I got from the one I got from Georgetown is
Mhm.
actually emergency and disaster management.
Okay, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what I was trying to segue into. And I've got a buddy. I've actually got a buddy of mine that works for the University of Washington. Um, and I was looking at going to go work for him. He was going to open up a position, and it was going to be 100% remote, so I could have done it wherever, which would have been great.
Absolutely.
But yeah, if we ever end up going to DC, I've got a I'm actually pretty fortunate. I've got some pretty good contacts from my time at Georgetown.
Well, you could be a program manager doing that stuff.
Yeah, I've applied to a bunch of program manager stuff, but I think because now everybody's looking for those different. It doesn't matter my background and experience; they're all looking for those certifications now.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
Yeah, I had a buddy that got into like hacking.
Oh yeah, that the ethical
Um,
hacking stuff.
yeah, so he's a certified ethical hacker, and he has like three or four certs. And so that's all he does. He doesn't have any college. He would never be able to get through any
Right.
college program because that's just not the way his brain works. But
Right.
he got enough of the things to where now he doesn't need it.
Right.
They don't care in a lot of fields.
No,
So that's
and
why
those guys do pretty well for themselves because like the DoD comes and goes, hey, break into this, and like, okay,
the biggest problem with those jobs are to be the managers, you do have to have degrees, right?
right.
But to just do the job, you don't. And the jobs start off really well paid, like
Mm-hmm.
120 to 140, but they top out at like 150 or 160.
Right.
So like there is no growth in it. You can get into the if you're good at it or you have some certifications, you can get into the field starting off higher than most engineers would.
Right.
But a good engineer over a 10-year period is going to be making way more than you at the end of that 10-year period because they're going to be able to move up and
Yep.
progress and go to a bigger company. And you're just not, no matter what
Yeah.
company you go to, you guys are niche and unique, but you're not
Mm-hmm.
so niche and unique that, I'm paying you $250,000 for
Right.
it. You're not Terry here, okay? Terry, she can, I don't, I hope she doesn't listen to this, but I say I don't know at what point you become like the Monopoly man, like the evil,
Right.
maniacal.
Yep.
But she's gotten to that point out there in LA. She just she loves LA and she yeah, she's out there.
Right on. I dig it,
Yeah.
man. So you're getting you said you're getting your MBA, and
Yeah.
then
Yes,
you said
sir.
you and so what would be something you would recommend to spouses, because like I'm in the same situation that a lot of other spouses are in, where I've got, they always tell spouses, we'll get a degree and you'll be fine, or get a degree and get clearance and you'll be fine. Uh, what is something you would recommend to spouses that are moving around and trying to continue on with a career? Because you said you're getting ready to go back to work. Do you already have something lined up? Or are you actively searching? How's that working then?
I'm actively searching and hoping. Like I had said,
Okay.
I have a contact who's trying to get me a full remote job with Department of Energy as a
Gotcha.
project manager.
Right on.
Uh, I would say that the best advice in general would be to find certifications that local places in the DoD will pay for. A lot of hospitals
Mm-hmm.
will pay for you, like give you a free certification in like medical coding,
Mm-hmm.
and get some certifications that are kind of broad based, that are things that you could see yourself doing.
Right.
That way you have options so that when you do eventually PCS, you might have two or three different fields that you're certified to go into, because
Gotcha.
there are a lot of jobs that just flat, you cannot do this unless you are hazmat certified. You
Right.
cannot do this unless you have a certification in medical coding, period. Doesn't
Right.
matter anything else. You have to have, you have to have Scrum,
Yeah.
or we're not, or we're
That's
not
another one
going,
I've seen a lot. The Scrum.
we will not accept anybody without this certificate. So now you're just putting yourself a couple of months behind trying to find a job, trying to do that. If you can get a government job, that's great. If you can get a job with a large company,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, because
Mm-hmm.
most of them will transfer you. So if you can get like a management job at Target, there's probably a Target near the military installation that you're going to go to next. And most of those large companies are very military friendly and will help move you. You might not get the exact same pay, but they're not going to like fire you. Oh, sorry you had to move. Like most of them will work with you. I had really good experiences with Walmart. I
Mm-hmm.
had no gaps in pay. They didn't change anything. It was just straight. We're going to switch you
Nice.
to a different team. Go ahead and go to Georgia. Have fun. We love you.
Yeah,
So
so my buddy that works for the University of Washington, he was working for Booz Allen for a little bit. Yeah, he went out of focus there for a little bit. I don't know what's going on there. It's trying. But he was working for Booz
jealous.
Allen, and he was like, his wife, there was a potential for his wife to go to Germany. And they were like, "Okay, what's your problem here?" He's like, "Well, if I'm going to Germany, you know, what does that mean for me?" They're like, "Well, we'll just move you to one of our people in Germany." And I was like, "That is that's gangster level, dude. Because that's amazing that they would even that the first thing out of their mouth isn't, "Well, we appreciate what you've been doing. We'll see you later." It's, "No, we're going to work with you and we're going to get through this." I'm like, that is great, dude. Like I've never had that ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the difference between working for like a franchise and
Hmm.
working for like a corporate,
Right.
right? So like your Toyota dealerships, like you had said before, like
Hmm.
it's going to be a franchise. So you don't actually work for Toyota.
Right.
You know, you work
No.
for like Philpott Toyota.
Yeah.
Uh, um, and so like there's a very limited ability to transfer, if
Hmm.
any. You know, the only thing you could really do is if you're friends with them, get the owner to maybe call and say, hey, I got a crazy hot salesman. Can you
Right.
help me out?
Yeah. And like I was a GS employee. I've been a GS employee a few times. And what bit me was if you can get a GS position that's permanent,
Mm-hmm.
you're pretty much good to go. Because once you get past that, it's now it's they changed it. It used to be 1 year. Now it's either a year and a half or 2 years before you make permanent status now. But I was a term employee. So instead of having that permanent protection, even though I was there for 2 years, because I was term, whenever I applied for my next position, I didn't have any of those protections.
Yeah, you're essentially contract worker, but a DoD
Yeah.
contract. Yeah,
So
correct.
I applied for a job at Little Rock, and this is the only one I've ever been a little salty about. So I was working for the Information Protection Office at Eielson, doing all the SF-86 stuff, industrial security, all that fun stuff, and applied for a job at Little Rock doing the exact same thing, to the point where the only thing I needed was a desk because it was my job description.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I already have the clearance. I have all of the certifications they're asking for, and they gave it to a person that was permanent from the same. So I'm sure you've looked at them, but like the GS career fields, they're labeled like 080, 0300, like they've got all the little
Mm-hmm.
numbers. So they gave it to somebody from the same career marker as me that was permanent, but had zero experience. So I'm like, okay, now they're having to pay for this person to get their clearance upgrade. Now they're having to pay for this person to go to all the classes to get all these certifications. So, but I was a little salty about that one. I was like, man, all I needed was a
Well,
desk.
well, and that's the bad. I mean, that's so. Here's the trade-off to working for large corporations or the
Mhm.
government is that the bureaucracy is can be mind numbing
Yeah.
sometimes. You really are a number. There really isn't a
Mhm.
lot of compassion going on there. Whereas that the smaller mom and pops or a local franchise, you are an individual, and they
Right.
they really will treat you like an individual. Uh, yeah, because my I had mentioned before my dad being an air traffic controller, he was the GS-15 on the airfield at Fort Polk.
Okay.
So he had to do all the hiring for all the civilians that worked
Right.
out there. But being the hiring manager in the government doesn't really mean you get to choose. It
Hmm.
just means you get the list
Yep.
and you have to pick the top three names on the list.
Hmm.
And if you have a disabled veteran that applied, well, they just get the job, whether you're more qualified or not.
Yeah, because
So like
they
right
had the
now,
points to bump them to the top.
yeah, so right now I'm a veteran, so I think I get 3 points or
Yeah.
5 points or something.
Hmm.
But I'm going to the VA in a couple of weeks. Within the next year, I'll probably be at least 40 or 50% disabled,
Right.
which will give me like
Give you
seven
those
points or
points.
something
Yep.
like that, which means it'll just be easier.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I want to say like I don't think that that's a bad thing at all. I really
well,
don't.
it's just something to be aware of if you're going to start applying for
Yeah.
government jobs as a spouse, that you do get preference, especially if you're looking right now. They're Biden signed an executive order, so everybody that falls into the executive branch, which includes DoD,
Hmm.
he basically told them they have to give second looks to spouses when they're
Hmm.
looking at jobs.
Yep.
Uh, and then you even got, because I applied on USA Jobs the other week, and some jobs will let you like use. There's like some weird special token thing you get as a spouse.
The
You get like a
PPP program.
yeah,
Yep.
the special like you can apply for this job and like basically like bump your name to the top of the list if you want. Uh,
The catch with that one, and so like so I filled out I've got my form filled out ready to go for that one. Once you send that round down range, if they pick your name for it and it's like, let's say you put it on all of them, You've applied for
Mhm.
10 jobs because you're just like, you know what? I just need work. I'm going to put my PPP preference on all 10 of these. If you get picked for one and it was one that you were like throwing it in there for funsies and you turn it down,
You lose it forever.
you lose it. You lose it for that duty station.
Okay. So you can put it on all the ones that you legitimately want.
Yeah, you absolutely can. You can put it on all the ones that you're like, no, that one looks great. That one looks great. That one looks great. But if you're just like, maybe,
Oh,
don't do it.
commissary in
Yeah,
Virginia. Oh,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Don't.
Don't do it
Okay.
because it
That's
went.
good to know because I had started applying for some jobs and I wasn't sure
Mhm.
whether or not that was like a one time use or not. Because yeah.
It's per duty station.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
hey,
Learn
look,
something new.
I told man, that's why I'm the professional dependent, dude. I've got this stuff mapped out.
Yeah. Well, you have a lot more experience than me. You know, I've only been doing this for what, 7 years now? 6
Well, I mean,
years.
yeah, well, I mean, you've been in it almost as long as I have, then, because Kelly joined in 2010.
Okay. Yeah, I got
So
out in 13. So it's been right around 10.
yeah, so
And you've been doing
we're almost there. We're almost neck and neck.
it.
So
So yeah, I just
what's
go ahead.
something that you've seen that surprised you being a military spouse? Like, what is it? What's some issues that you've seen from your end that you're like, huh, I never would have thought this was a thing for military spouses?
Uh that's a good question. Um like in regards to the military or just in regards to just being a spouse, like what did I not expect?
Well, let's make it a two-part question. Like, just as a spouse, especially for you coming from being prior active duty to going to be the stay-at-home, the stay-at-home dad and the spouse,
Mm-hmm.
and just in regards to being a spouse to an active duty member. Like, what's something that you're like, huh, never would have considered that being an issue.
Uh I guess the how big uh the what could seem like small changes could be to like schedules.
Hmm.
So um so some units are very flexible
Hmm.
in your work time, like your spouse's work time when they're at work.
Yep.
They can take off when they need to. They can have somebody cover down,
Hmm.
like for medical appointments or something.
Yeah.
Some units are not, and some units like to change things last minute. And I just never really thought about like how hard it could be to set up a doctor's appointment,
Hmm.
let alone doctor's appointments for 3 or 4 people,
Yeah.
and try and keep all of them straight and be able to have the time. Because if I have to go get blood drawn, I
Hmm.
can't bring 2 kids with me.
Right.
But so I had back surgery while we were in Washington. So she got like 12 days off for free as like my caretaker or
Right.
something. But then I was supposed to do physical therapy and do all this other stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I couldn't do it
Right.
because like as soon as she went back to work, it's like whether or not you're supposed to take the next 6 months easy, too
Yeah. You
bad.
can't.
Like because there's no family,
Yep.
right? Your friends are busy, they're working,
Right.
you know. And I know this is going to sound mean to anybody that would be a civilian, but you've known them for like a year. They really your friends,
Right.
because you're going to leave. You're
Yeah.
leaving in a year and a
There,
half.
there's
So
there's that barrier automatically. There's a
you
barrier.
kind of defend yourself a little bit, and like they're I would call them friends, but you're more like friendly with them.
Yeah.
So like there's nobody else to rely on. Like I need my kids to be with somebody I can.
Hmm.
So I told the physical therapist, I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this. She's like, oh, we're going to work it out. I'm like, no, we're not, guy. I'm just give me
Are
the
you coming to my
exercises.
house? That's the only way
Like
we're
just
working this out.
give me the exercises and set me up for success because I'm gonna have to do it by myself.
Yeah.
And I know you're going to tell me not to pick up my kid, but I'm still going to have to pick up my 1 year old.
Yeah.
He's
When
still
your
going to
one
sit
year
there
old
and
walks
cry.
up doing
He's going to
this.
cry and put his arms up, and
Yep.
he's one. I have to pick him up. Like, sorry, too bad.
Right.
It's life. I'll break my back again for the kids because that's just what you do.
Yep.
And so I never even thought about like, oh, sorry, I got to stay late today. Like
Hmm.
if I was in the army and doing that, like, sorry, I'm going to stay late tonight, or oh, we have an inspection tomorrow morning, so I'm
Right.
going to be at work at 4 until 6. It's
Yep.
like, well, that might throw their whole schedule off, and
Yep.
I never even thought about how uh, how flexible you really have to be as a spouse,
Mhm.
especially when you're dealing with systems that are inflexible.
Right.
You know, all aspects of the military are so inflexible, to include your spouse's schedule, that it can sometimes be very difficult to get anything done,
Mhm.
especially if you're trying to manage a job as well, let alone a
Right.
career.
No,
It's just,
I totally get that because there's I've that's probably been the one thing I point to as far as being a benefit to being a stay at home dad as a military spouse is if especially the position my wife is in, like if she's in meetings or they're spinning up an exercise or they've got stuff or this before coming here because the position she has now I don't have to worry about exercises anymore, which is great. Um, but if she's not, depending on what's going on, I can take the kids to doctor's appointments. I can take the kids to practice. Like my youngest is in gymnastics. She's at gymnastics twice a week. I can take her to those classes. There's not something that my wife is having to ask her boss, "Hey, can I take leave in the middle of the day to go do this thing?" and have her boss tell her no.
yeah,
You know, it's definitely
absolutely.
been one thing I look at as a stay at home dad that I see as a true benefit is being able to
Yeah,
be there for my kids and my wife whenever stuff's going on and they absolutely need me, I can be
yeah. I wish I wouldn't have been so harsh to some of those people when I was 20, you know,
there.
like I was never mean to anybody, you know, because that's
Right.
just not who I am. But like in my head, like I'm definitely mean to people in my head, right?
Well, sure.
And it definitely makes me think twice about like, wow, like I just didn't have the perspective. I didn't
Right.
understand. You know, I think some of that stuff has really helped with making me more empathetic,
Hmm.
not just sympathetic, but being
Yeah.
able to really understand. And I think it really helped me in the like it helps to be more empathetic, you know, when you go working with people, like just in regular jobs, you can be more empathetic and understand how hard it could be for these people to have to do all this stuff, especially like single parents.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't even understand how single parents in the military exist. Like it's
It's crazy.
impossible.
That's wild to me, and I'm sure we both know boatloads, and it's just like I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, I got a really good friend in Germany. She's a specialist who was a she was an old clerk. So she worked in the motor pool and did all the computer stuff. So ordered all the parts and
Okay.
did all that stuff. And I have no idea how she had two kids and did all that. Like it was crazy.
It's
And
it's
had and still had time to like hang out with us and go drinking on the weekends. You know, like
it's
we would,
she's a witch. It's magic.
yeah,
There's no other way.
yeah.
So what's been something, and I know you've got kids and you're getting ready to do you're doing your MBA, so I'm not going to keep you much longer. This has been a phenomenal. Really have enjoyed this conversation. It's been great. Um, what has been one of the more rewarding things for you as a spouse?
To get to take credit in some of their accomplishments at work.
Hmm.
I like to I'm a big politics guy. I like to read the news. I like to stay up to date. I like
Hmm.
to and I like to talk a lot. So I ever since we were enlisted, because I used to do this back when she was doing intel, I'd be like, oh my god, I read these 18 news stories and let me tell you about all of them. I just like dump on her because
Right.
she's at work all day and she's not reading the news or anything. And I would tell her all this stuff. Like for the last 6 months or so, I've been telling her about the online discussions about we're not going to get into all of it here, you know, because it's a huge can of worms. But like the whole like trans youth
Yeah.
and the pro and the con and
Hmm.
all I was just explaining to like the conversation that's going on, because
Right.
if you don't look for it, it can be very misleading as to what's actually being said depending on where you get your news source from.
100%.
So
Yes.
I try and kind of get a good, you know, read from all angles and really understand what's going on. And it was like her second or third day at the
Uh-huh.
child and family clinic, and she had a kid that was trans come in,
Hmm.
and she knew the language, she knew the
Right.
verbiage, she knew how to handle the situation, even though she had never read anything or been involved in it.
Right.
And like me knowing that, like, well, I've helped her do
Yeah.
better at her job by having the time to be able to do this stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, so I can take credit in a little bit of her, like, oh, she's getting promoted to major in like a week here, or like 3 days.
Right.
I'm like, well, I kind of helped her make major. Like, yeah, I can do that. I gave her the free time and
Right.
took care of the kids and took care of the budget and made sure that everything was paid for and made sure that everything was taken care of, so that all she had to do was go to work if that's all she
Right.
wanted to do.
For sure. Eh,
She can cook whenever she wants. She can go
Yep.
shopping whenever she wants, but she doesn't have to do any of it. You
Right.
know.
And you know that I think that's one of those things that I think people try to bag on spouses for, but I don't think they truly understand the significance of that. Because like my wife knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that if something happened and she had to bail out tomorrow to go on a month-long TDY or short notice deployment, she knows the house is covered. And that gives them that sense of security to be able to do the job they need to do, which helps them get those promotions and do better at work and not have to worry about what's going on at home because we've got the house stuff covered.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of times at work, and I'm sure Kelly, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure Kelly's much the same way. I mean, she made Colonel, so she has to be a little bit of like, the boss comes into the room and says something like, "Hey, we need a clinician, to go TDY for 3 weeks,"
Hmm.
and the five clinicians are all like sitting there, and one of them's like, "Yeah, I'll do it."
Right.
Right? They can only do that if they trust that their home is taken care of.
Yeah.
But that's the person who ends up getting promoted.
Right.
That's the person who everyone calls and depends on, and
Hmm.
knows that they can trust. Like, she had a lot of time off after my back surgery, after I had started recovering, because her boss basically had told her, I know that if you're not at work, it's because you're doing something important, and
Right.
all of your work is always done.
Yeah.
So I don't really care. Like,
Hmm.
keep doing your work and keep turning your work in, and do whatever you want to do. I don't care if you're in your office or at home,
Right.
but the work is good quality work. It's getting turned in on
Hmm.
time. So, and you can only do that if you're the person who's going out there and doing that stuff.
Right.
And you can only do that if you trust that your home is safe.
Exactly. And I kind of chuckled to myself a minute ago when you said we were talking about reading the news and getting your news from different sources. A couple of things. Every year I post the. Have you ever seen? I'm sure you've seen it. The spreadsheet about the media bias and how
Yeah,
biased. I
absolutely.
post that spreadsheet every year because I'm a very I'm like middle of the road. Like I think most sensible people are. Like we don't lean too far this way. We don't lean too far that way. We're like, no, these people are just as dumb as these people because if y'all would look at what you're actually arguing, it's more here, it's not here. But so one of my mentors is Dr. Donnell Harvin. You may have seen him on CNN or some of the other things. He was one of the he was the DC's chief of Homeland Security leading into January 6th, right? Leading into the January 6th events.
Okay.
And so, with a lot of the January 6th investigations and stuff, he's been on the news quite a bit. He's testified before Congress and whatnot. I love the man to death. He is, despite what may be being shown on different news medias, he is the most apolitical person I've met that's in politics. He's like
Says a lot.
left wing, right wing, same bird. He's like, we got to look here. And he told us in class, this was in my public health class I had with him. He's like, if you spend an hour watching Fox, you have to spend an hour watching CNN.
Yeah.
If you spend an hour watching CNN, you need to watch an hour of NPR. Like you cannot just get your news from one space, or you're just listening to it in an echo chamber and they're telling you what you want to hear. You got to listen to the stuff you don't want to hear too, because they're going to give you information that these guys are leaving out, and this information is important too. You just may not like the spin on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah, I mean, you got to listen to a little Alex Jones to figure out, what are the crazies saying? Like,
Yeah.
There's probably something truthful in there, or it might make you like, what? No, let me look
Yeah.
this up, and then now your interest is kind of sparked. You're like, okay, well that's kind of true.
Right.
Like they started with something that was true, and I hadn't heard about it. That's kind of neat, But that's how all the news channels kind of are, right? Well, that technically happened, but
Yeah.
you're not selling it to me in the right way.
Yeah.
Like,
It started here. You took it way this way.
yeah. And all of them kind of do that. So I like to get a little crazy. I like to get a little sensible.
Mhm.
Uh, Personally, I grew up very conservative, right?
Yeah. As
But
most of us in that area did.
but I never went to church. I got kicked out of First Baptist Church.
Oh,
Um,
congratulations. I never made it in the front door.
Sarah Farr, you
Hmm.
remember the Farrs?
Yeah.
She drugged me to church a couple of times, and I got into it with a youth leader, and they told me not to come, or they told me to come back when I was more sensible. Sarah Richmond drugged me there a couple of
Yeah.
times, and they're like, we remember you have to leave.
Hmm.
um,
Like you're on the list. You can't come back.
yeah, the Methodist Church sponsored the Boy Scout troop that I was in. That's how I knew Andy
Uh-huh.
before band, because he went to
Gotcha.
that church.
Yep.
And uh and uh so that's where and they were always pretty cool to me, but I never attended church, so
Hmm.
I wasn't religious, but I was spiritual.
Yeah.
uh and as I've gotten older, I think I did the opposite. You're supposed to be super liberal when you're young and then
Hmm.
become more conservative, and I almost feel like I've going all over the place and living all over the world and seeing some of the great things and some of the absolutely
Yeah.
horrible things has caused me to be more progressive
Yeah.
in ways. I would never call myself a progressive, just because of the stigma in America of what that comes with it. In
Right.
today's world, it basically means socialist, but
Yeah.
you know, but I'm definitely more progressive than I am conservative. But I have some super conservative views too on certain things. So it's
Yeah.
like, I like to think for myself. I don't like the party idea, and you have to vote this way or that
Right.
way. I think Donald Trump is comical, but I think Obama or Biden might be a little old for the job. Like, they have their pros and cons.
Hmm.
Like,
Well,
uh,
the big thing I catch a lot of flack for is climate change. And one of the papers that I did was showing. So I did all the research, all peer reviewed stuff, but I showed how the natives in Alaska are losing food sources because the ice shelves aren't sticking around as long. They're not as thick. And a lot of the natives up north in the northern parts of Alaska would use underground freezers. They would basically just dig into the permafrost because the permafrost was always basically
yeah,
at freezer temperature. And now the permafrost is no longer maintaining that temperature, and they're losing thousands of pounds of food a year because they can't keep it in the traditional ways. But when
yeah.
was the last time you saw a deep freeze at Home Depot that would hold a bowhead whale? So
Well, or have the electricity to run it.
you're heavily the electricity to run
You
it.
know,
Exactly.
that was free. That was free freezer.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I catch a lot of flack for. I'm like, well, the evidence in there, they're like, but is it though? I'm like, yeah, it actually is. So
I would listen to an argument for how much is it man-made versus natural. That'd be an
mhm,
argument I could listen to. But if
right,
you're at this point, if you're denying that the climate is warming,
right.
like you're being willfully ignorant of the evidence that has been put forth in every journal that writes about this.
I
Like,
think
it,
where it started, I think where we got off on the wrong foot with it was, and it was strictly just a matter of the time. And obviously we've now steered into something else, but that's what my podcast is fun for. Uh, is they start off calling it global warming,
yeah,
and that to me, and I think because that was the easy target, right? Like there's certain areas that are getting hotter, so we're going to call it global warming. Well, then people are like, oh, well, look at this. These areas are getting cooler. I'm like, well, yeah, because that's the way weather works.
yeah,
Like let's not deny that the weather patterns are shifting and some areas are getting warmer, some areas are getting colder.
Absolutely.
Like there's even historic, you can even look in recent history, like that's why the Champagne region of France is so amazing for champagne, is because there was that giant climate shift. It's also why the Champagne region of France is having the worst like champagne production in years
Yeah,
for the
because
last
it's
couple of
changing.
years. So, but it is what it is. So, but man, I have this honest, I'm not gonna lie, dude. This has gone way longer than I thought. I had no idea how long our conversation was gonna last. I was hopeful for an hour. We're coming up on close to two.
Yeah, we had a real it was a good conversation,
I I really enjoyed getting. I've really enjoyed reconnecting with you because, like I said, we haven't talked since like my senior year of high school. Um, you mentioned Andy briefly. Um, you know, that was a guy that we like. I played soccer with, doing pickup soccer, and you knew him way better than I did. But
Yeah, I mean, I knew him from church. I knew him in because I played soccer. I
yep,
knew him in the band. Uh, yeah, he was the real deal. I did air defense. He was the real deal. He
yeah.
went all the way.
I
You know,
I whenever I got the notice that he had gotten killed, I called Longenacre because me and Ben Longenacre still stay in really close contact. And I was like, because I hadn't seen or heard from Andy in ever. And I was like, wait, I'm like, soccer playing Andy went on to become real life GI Joe. Like
yeah,
what?
yeah. He was a medic too. Those guys don't
Yeah,
play.
no, they don't. Like
Like
I've
they're
got, because so I've been a member of Team RWB for many years now, and it's a veteran service organization, Team Red, White, and Blue. I've been very fortunate to meet like people from all walks of life, and I've got a few friends that were special forces in different branches, and like, dude, like, yeah, it's crazy to think that somebody from the area we grew up made it to that level, because those guys are, and the Green Beret medics, they got to learn veterinary medicine too.
yeah, they do a little bit of everything.
Yeah,
Like
because
those
they go into the they go out there into the villages, and that's how they build rapport. So
Yeah, we had two of them in Iraq. So what we did, we were trying to. I mean, this is all old stuff now, so I don't
right.
think any of it's like super. So we had these little, we had these like handheld. They would scan your eye and get an
Hmm.
iris picture, and you put all the people's data into it.
Right.
So what we did is we hooked up with the two SF medics, and we went out there with some the counter intel guys, some interpreters, and some security, and we ran a free dental clinic for them.
Hmm.
We were just collecting all of their personal information
Right.
because we knew the people who were building the bombs.
Right.
We had information about them, and so we were going out into the neighborhoods that we were pretty sure they were in
Right.
and setting up free dental clinics.
Hmm.
Uh, and the medics were the ones providing the dental care. So
Right.
they went to a dentist for a couple of weeks and learned some real fast stuff because
Right.
they know a
Here's how
lot
you
about
clean teeth.
medicine, and then went out there so that they could make the people's teeth, not to fix them but make them feel better, so they would feel like they were getting. But we were
Right.
just collecting all their data, and we found the guy that was, we had the fingerprints and stuff for.
Hmm.
And so we're like, okay, we'll track him and watch him go back to his house, and then that night,
No more
secret
house.
squirrels go out and get him, like, bring him back. So yeah, I mean, that was the level of their professionalism,
Yeah.
intelligence, understanding of everything,
Yeah.
just and it's cool to know that they're just normal people from normal places
Right.
that were just really good at what they did.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds almost mean, like there wasn't anything in particular about him in our hometown that he wasn't the captain of the football team.
No.
He wasn't, the drum major. He wasn't in charge of JROTC. He was a dude that went to our high school that was really cool.
Yeah.
Um, but apparently was insanely smart and motivated.
Yeah.
And ended up making the most out of his time here.
Yeah, because
And
I think about, because whenever I think about Andy from back in high school, I think about the dude that he was well rounded, but he was just a good dude.
yeah,
like at the end of the day, you're like, no, he was just a really solid, good dude.
He'd talk a little
That
crap and help you out.
yeah,
Like he'd talk a little crap and help you out.
he's just a good dude.
Yep.
So anyway, yeah. So man, I really appreciate you volunteering your time because as a fellow stay at home dad, I know our free time is valuable. So I appreciate you giving up 2 hours of your evening
Yeah,
to sit
absolutely.
here and chat with me for a little while.
As I say, I only got about 7 pages this week to write, so it's not too bad.
Oh, that's not too bad. You'll be fine.
No, the NBA is not too hard. I'm really not even doing it for a job. I'm doing it because I mean this goes back to being the parent part, right? But I'm doing it because I want the kids to know that education is important and
Yes.
opens doors, and I will love you and be happy no matter what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do a lot more if you just get that piece of paper. And at
Right.
this point, a bachelor's is the minimum.
It really is almost sad that a bachelor's is basically the equivalent to a high school diploma now.
Like if you like unless you want to go into a trade, which again, like I have no issues with trade schools,
Yeah, I
like
like my
like
lights being on, so I like the trades.
well, like doing that project manager thing
Mm-hmm.
for Walmart. I worked with a lot of like plumbers,
Yep.
electricians, carpenters. We had the big thing we were doing was ripping up all the tiles and polishing the concrete.
Okay.
And the guys that did that we were in Texas, and it was a team out of Minnesota, and those were some of the coolest guys doing some of the weirdest stuff
Yeah.
I had ever seen. But you would never learn that in college. You know what
Right.
I mean? You can't.
Absolutely.
So like if you want to pursue a cool job like that, a trade, like 100% go for it. But if you want to do any of these other jobs, engineer, doctor, lawyer, anything in the medical field, you have to get a degree.
Yep.
Uh, and I want them to know that mom and dad can both do it.
Mm-hmm.
And here they are, they're hanging on the wall, look how pretty
Yep.
they are. Now why don't you go get one?
Right.
So I'm doing it for the kids, I'm not doing it for me. An MBA is not going to help me get a job.
Right.
Like it can't hurt, but like I'm not
Yeah.
applying to jobs in that require it you
Right.
know
Yeah. I definitely, as a son of a teacher, I definitely agree with you that education is important. I was the first. So it was me and four other boys, me and four cousins. I was the first one to graduate high school, and I'm the middle. So I had two older, two younger. I was the
mm-hmm.
first one to graduate high school, the first one to go to college, and the only one with a master's degree. And I've got
Nice.
and because I'm a glutton for punishment, I got two master's degrees. So because why not, right?
Yeah, well, I
Um,
mean, once you get one, like they become easier, right?
and it's funny because like I talk about my undergrad experience, and I did the exact opposite of you, or kind of what you start out to be. Like I went straight from high school straight into college
Mm-hmm.
because I had a scholarship for band because I marched at Northwestern. As most people that graduated from DeRitter did, we either went to Northwestern State or we went to McNeese,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Or Grambling.
or Graham. Uh, yeah, a few of the people that couldn't went to LSU and ULL, but we won't hold that against them.
Yeah, no, it's not their fault.
It's not their fault. I'm going to catch a lot of hell for that one, but it's okay. Uh,
It's okay. The
so,
sound of today, right? It's
right, pretty
ULL.
much. So, but you know, they're like, so what was your GPA in undergrad? I'm like, I graduated. I'm like, we're like, can we just like, I went. Can we just not discuss?
Yeah.
Like, and then my master's degree, I got a 3.9 for my first master's degree and a 3.77 for my second one. But then I look at the level of work I had to turn in for my second one. I was like, it was Northwestern State for the first one and then Georgetown for the second one. That 3.7 was pretty damn impressive to me.
Yeah, it's a little bit harder than the Northwestern.
Yeah, I looked at my I did a paper in lieu of thesis for my first master's, and I looked at what that I found that document what it was. They let me write a lesson plan
Okay.
and turn in a lesson plan for, and it was like a course of fire. Like I did like a firearms instructor lesson plan, and they let me turn that in for my paper in lieu of thesis. And I
Nice.
looked at that, I was like, that would not fly in my entry level class at Georgetown. Like I would have turned that in. They would have been like, how did you get in? Like,
Yeah, for my undergrad, you had three options there as a because it was in Hawaii.
mm-hmm.
They had an entrepreneurial capstone. There were three capstones essentially.
Okay.
You had the entrepreneurial one where you had to design a business from scratch.
Hmm.
That was, and you had all the documents and everything supporting it to turn into a bank to get a
Okay.
loan. Like that was like, and basically the teachers were helping you design your business so that when you graduated, you could go to the bank.
Right.
Like that was the whole point of it. There was the internship. So if you could get an internship with one of the dozen companies that
Hmm.
accepted them, most of the people that did that were doing finance or accounting
Okay.
because there were two huge accounting firms and then one big finance firm, and they would take like 100 interns each.
Right.
So if you get into an internship, you did that one. And then what I did was the third one, which was the case study. So you
Okay.
had like I think it was 7 case studies,
Hmm.
and you had to like analyze all the different things. You had to do 7 case studies
Right.
essentially. Uh, and so you didn't have one big thesis, you didn't have one big paper, but I
Right.
probably wrote like 400 pages in that class
I believe
for
it.
all those different case studies, and it was all it was like the finance portion, the accounting portion,
Right.
the marketing, and analyzing and SWOTs, and
Hmm.
Porter's model of blah blah blah, nobody cares, quoting all these Norton and Graham and all these other people that nobody cares about. And so, but now that I'm in my MBA, I went to class, and all these people around me, I'm the only person that didn't get. Everyone else in my class got their degree from University of Maryland Global Campus.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of them, but it's like basically an online school.
Yep.
And there's nothing against online schools or anything, but none of them even understand like this first paper that we're writing right now. Like none of them had a concept of like what the teacher wanted.
Right.
They're super lost and like behind, like a week
Hmm.
behind. Like we have a group chat and we're like talking about it, and I feel like I really got set up for success going to an average school,
Right.
whereas I feel like the level and quality of their education was a little bit lower than what it should have been.
Yeah.
Um, so all colleges aren't created equal, and as a spouse, I would look to spend your money at a good public school
Mhm.
near the base, not necessarily the base or the not necessarily the school that's right outside or on base.
Right. Well, I know like when we moved here, that was the very first thing that we looked at. We looked at the schools. Because again, kid of a school teacher. So I know anywhere we go, my mom's gonna be like, what are the schools like? And my wife went to vet school, so she's highly educated
Yeah.
and she's got her MPH, so she's still way smarter than I am. Um, but school's important to us, and we want to make sure that we're giving our kids the best opportunities and trying to set them up. And so the area we're in is unfortunately one of the more expensive areas around here, but it's one of the few places we've ever seen that the high school is rated a 10 out of 10.
Oh, nice.
So if we're here to get our kids through high school, which is slim, but the possibility is there, then we're setting our kids up. And that's something that's important, because if they choose not to go to college, then I know I did the best job we could to that point. And if they choose to go to college, then I know they are set up to do well going into
Mhm.
college. So
Yeah, and again, for anybody that might hear this that has young kids, there's a program, Childcare Aware, that's super awesome. It's
okay.
for daycare. They'll if you live away, like I think it's 15 miles or more away from the installation. It might
Hmm.
differ depending on where you're at. They will give you a stipend per month to offset the cost of childcare versus the on-base cost.
Oh, nice.
So for instance, like because we live in Montgomery County, right?
Yeah,
Which is
so I lived in Gaithersburg when I was there.
okay,
Well,
yeah.
actually,
Well, I
so no,
mean,
so technically I lived in Montgomery Village, which is inside of Gaithersburg.
mhm.
But yeah, very, very familiar.
I was gonna say we live in Kings Farm, which
Yep.
is it says Rockville, but it's actually in Gaithersburg.
I know exactly where you are, dude.
I was gonna say like that's where we live. So we were zero point 0.2 miles uh far enough away to get the childcare aware to where we
Mm,
didn't have to get it on Bethesda. But it's about $1,000 a month per kid right now, and then she'll
mm.
start kindergarten next school year, so we won't have to worry about it then. But childcare here is extremely expensive in
I,
Montgomery County.
I told you, it made me be a stay-at-home dad for a year.
Yeah, so I think it's like 2,150 per kid
Yes.
per month.
Yes.
but they're giving us, so that's $4,000 a month.
Yep.
But they're giving us 2 grand a month, so one per kid, or $1,000 per kid.
Right.
So that really, I mean, that's $24,000 a year that
Yeah.
they're giving us towards childcare. So that makes it completely doable, because before you had to make at least 48,000
Yeah.
just to pay for the school.
Yeah.
So anything, so with tax and everything, you're looking at 55 plus to profit anything.
Hmm.
But now you can take that minus 24, so you could make 45 and still make something.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at those mid-range jobs where a lot of spouses might be looking, where they have some skills like me, right?
Hmm.
You're looking at something between like 50 and 80, right?
Right.
You're not professional enough to make the 90 to 100,
Right.
but you're not a server making, 25.
Right.
So if you're anywhere between like that 50 to 80,000, now it's achievable, and for you to be able to go out and
Mhm.
work, continue in your career, and it'd be worth it. It's not just sending your, like, paying for your kids to go to school.
Yeah. Like I said, whenever we lived in Montgomery Village, we were looking at all these different childcare options, and people that would look at me. They said, "There's no way childcare costs that much." I'm like, I'm telling you, it was 2 grand per kid.
Yeah, this ain't
And
no Mother Goose,
and
okay?
whenever we were there, right, that was across the street from me. But they so, and I think whenever we were there, I think it may have been like 17 to 1800,
Okay, yeah,
because we were there in 2000. We were there in 2014. Yeah, we were there 2014 to 2015, and it was like 15 to 1700
yeah,
per kid,
yeah.
and
It's a
we had
lot.
two. So I was like, what am I going to find that's making 3 grand a month, at, you
Mm-hmm.
know, for a year? So that's why I was a stay at
Yeah.
home dad. And this is Lanyap, but so where y'all at? There is a kids museum. I think it's in Chevy Chase,
Okay.
but it's incredible. And I think it's just called Children's Museum. And you can get in for free if you bring like a book to
Okay.
exchange. And it's great because they have all these different rooms that are set up where the kids can like put on outfits and like play with stuff in the room, and then you can get a free book on your way out.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
So
I'll have to
your
look.
oldest may like that.
And so I'll have to look, because a lot of people have said a lot of things have changed, like post COVID. Like a
Yeah,
lot of
this was
places,
pre-COVID, so
I would say a lot of places closed. There's like a village like in Kings Farm. There's like
uh
a little, like, I don't know, like a little cul-de-sac type deal with like a bunch of shopping centers.
yeah.
But like three-fourths of them are all like for rent,
Mm,
for lease.
they didn't
And
make it
people
through
around
COVID.
here had said like they were all full, and
Right.
then COVID happened, they all shut down, and now some of them have been able to come back.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, this was like the only cheap place in Chevy Chase. Because
yeah,
Chevy Chase is not like, you. If you drive through there, don't drive too fast because we don't belong there. But the kids museum, if it's still there, it is I highly recommend it,
yeah, okay,
because
yeah, I wrote it down. I'll definitely look
I
into it.
really, because I think that's what it was. I think if you brought if you brought a kid's book, or like 3 kids books, then you could get in for free, and then on the way out you could get another book.
Okay,
So it was really cool.
nice. Yeah,
But
yeah,
dude, I'm not going to keep you any longer. We can stay in touch on the socials. It's
yeah, yeah.
it's 9 o'clock, and then I know my kids are getting ready to go to bed. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, and if you need, if you have any other topics or anything you want to talk about, I'm pretty, as long as I have a couple weeks notice, I'm pretty available and open.
yeah, I'm
Um,
sure we can come up with something for sure, because this was a
yeah,
great conversation. I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun, dude.
yeah, it's nice to hear other branches' perspectives too, right? Because it really is like a big family, and there really are a lot more similarities
Hmm.
than there are differences. It's just the names of a lot of things might be different.
Right.
And that might even be something to go into, is because I know that we had a lot of weather guys
Hmm.
and a lot of TAC Ps and stuff. So they were all Air Force guys,
Yep.
but there's no Air Force base at Fort Drum,
Right.
you know? So they're stuck, and they've learned all this language, and now they have to relearn a whole new language to work on an army base, and it's the same thing if you go work with the Navy. When they start talking
Mhm.
about bulkheads and
Right.
port and stuff, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, it's the PX, and they're
Right.
like, no, it's the BX. Like, it's Um,
This is just kind of funny. This will be Lanyat part 2 for you. So one of my best friends in Alaska, he was the TACP commander at Fort
okay.
Wainwright, and we always joke. So him and I met on a triathlete Facebook page whenever I was still in Maryland, and we joked that we swiped right on each other on the internet. We've been best friends ever since. Um, so I actually became like kind of tight with a bunch of TACPs and JTACs up at Fort Wainwright, even though I was at Eielson. So like I'd be, messing around with all these guys that are, downrange putting warheads on foreheads. And then like, so basically what happened was the job I was doing, I ended up helping out a lot of them because they would need to get like clearance upgrades to go to different schools or to be able to eligible for different positions. So I'd help them work through their different things to be different eligible for different stuff. And they were like, "Hey, dude, why don't you come do PT with us one day?" And I was like, "Okay." And I showed up, and they're like, "Wait, you're here?" I'm like, "Well, you invited me. Did you think I was scared?" I'm like civilians get PT time. On top of that, I just said that I was coming down here to do an inspection because y'all haven't had an inspection in a year, so it's time for an inspection anyway. So yeah, I'm here, dude. Let's do this. And they're like,
For a
"We
run.
we didn't think you were going to show." Well, this was in the middle of winter.
Oh,
We were supposed to go. They were just going to do. They were going to do a gym workout. And I showed up. They're like, "We just decided to go skiing because we didn't think you were going to show." But for whatever reason, they loved me after that. They're like, "You're the first person we've ever invited for PT that showed up." I'm
wow.
like, "I'm not scared of you guys." So,
She's like, you're not that big, okay?
yeah, because at that point, I'd already started powerlifting at that point. So I was like, "I'll go to the gym with any one of y'all. I ain't scared of y'all." And like, "Well, we're going skiing." I'm like, "Well, I didn't bring my skis. I can't go." So,
Great.
but anyway, dude, we will definitely do this again. We'll come up with we'll figure out another topic. And this was great. I really do appreciate you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we'll talk soon, Robert. You have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.
All right.
Bye bye.
Yeah, later, bud.